listening tonight. I got a feeling that the cards just ain't right. I'm so salty, must not give in to rage. And I'm wondering what those rollers will say. Scrubs to the left of me, cheaters to the right. Here I am, gonna roll a derby tonight. Gonna roll a derby tonight. Gonna roll a derby tonight.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hidden City Roller Derby. I am your host Simkoff and joined as always by co-host Remedy aka Glenn. How are you, sir?
How's it going, Ben? How you going tonight?
Excellent. Pretty excited. We've got a very exciting interview to give you tonight. So this show, lots of things been going on. So the interview with the Brisbane crew, we'll cross over to that in a little bit. We've also had a huge weekend of Elemental Championships with new clans suddenly claiming the mantle. It seems like that restricted list has really shaken things up. We've got a whole ream of new spoilers to talk about, and also Glenn is as the innovator that he is. You heard it first about Turbo Yurt here on the Hidden City Roller Derby, and this time he's got a second hit. He's going to talk to you about the exciting world of Mill, the exciting and interactive world of Mill, I repeat. So, very exciting episode tonight. Let's talk about. Have you been playing any sort of L5R recently, Glenn? Just Mill, or you been experimenting outside the Mill archetype?
No, I've continued playing that deck that Bert shuts me down on with the even the odds Lion deck. Being able to Voice of Honor, those 5 fires plays and the shut down those 4 GDIC plays on your charges. It's been good. Lion seem quite good, man. Like even the odds are Ujiaki and then fired off his ability. It's just, I don't know, it's just fun to kind of find these synergistic plays. All courtesy of the seals. The seals seem to enable all these combos.
Man, seals are strong. Which seals? You're talking about Seal of the Lion?
So Seal of the Lion in the Lion deck. But I've also been messing around with the Crab Berserker deck with the Seal of the Crab. So we're just trying to get all the seals on the restricted list, but the Seal of the Dragon still hasn't hit the list. So long way off for the other ones, I think.
I think Seal of the Lion is probably not quite at the top of Tyler's thinking in terms of cards that are really busting up the environment at the moment.
Not just yet.
So I mean, it's for even the odds, right? Is there any other cards that relies around?
No,
I guess to make.
No, legitimately, it's just that one card. It's just that one card. Like it is literally 6 cards that work off each other. Like it's not nothing else special than that.
Well, is that what's that guy? Not Toshi something or other. There's the 2-coster who gets +6 force and blows up unless you got a commander. You can stop him blowing up.
Just like keep him around, like eternally, like getting +5 but not winning. Not breaking conflicts. Seems.
Yeah, man. Just win some rings and win via honor or dishonor.
Maybe we could add in Fall in the Battle and just constantly kill the character that they put in the way.
Yeah, I love it. It doesn't actually let you win the game, but it does feel good.
No, but yeah, so I've just been playing that, and then I had my locals tonight, so I played some Scorpion Mill, and the results were I could probably more openly dishonor them if I didn't go for the Mill win condition, but
which
it is fun
was
to empty your opponent's deck into their discard.
What were you playing there? That was your Scorpion Mill deck, was it?
Yes, Scorpion Mill.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get into the Scorpion Mill deck later on, but we might just do a little bit of a shout out. Your locals tonight, I think it was we have a legendary player from Melbourne who's leaving us to return to his homeland. Marwin, the Salt Master himself. He's probably the saltiest and most excitable player I've ever played with. He is the master of the maze. I know that Toridori has it as his logo, but I think Marwin is really, he's the man who's mastered playing maze and losing with that card. So I think you got to play a last few games with him. Was it a good send-off?
Yeah, it was quite great. He played Maze of Illusion on me 4 times, and I successfully guessed 3 times.
Didn't disappoint.
So I was quite zen about it. Paid 4 fate to dishonor and bound 1 character. It was almost like a fate worse than death sort of value.
I feel like sometimes there's these characters that find their way into playgroups, and they just like they really add to the atmosphere of the game of the community. You know, and I think sometimes those players like Marwin who have such a big presence when they sit down, and they're so much fun to play with, and they get so frustrated with themselves and they make mistakes, but they also just play the craziest decks. I'm gonna really miss the guy, and wherever he lands next, I hope he inflicts his particular version of a rage and glory on them.
Yeah, no, he definitely added to the playgroups that we played in, and it wasn't a tournament without him. You know, there's a little cry from the table they was playing at if if he got mazed or if the 4 edict didn't go his way. I Kikyo his display of powers a bit too, and he just reminded me of like I'm gonna miss the guy when he goes away. But yeah, he's been great.
Kikyo'd his display of powers. I've just got less and less respect for you.
Well, even worse, I Kikyo'd his 5 fires that I milled off the top of his deck, so he had to play it into the conflict. So you can definitely get that salt coming out quite early in a match.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Yeah, he'll be sorely missed here in Melbourne.
Yeah. Yes, he will be. And we wish him the best of luck with whatever he does next with his life. Just not playing L5R in Melbourne, it seems like. I think it is so much fun. Like I've had various players in different card games that have those sort of bigger than life personalities, and they're always great to have around the game. And what you're talking about, where like you're yelling very early on, you hear from across the room. I used to call it, the group I used to play with in this other card game I played with, we called it the Cry of Doom. And the Cry of Doom was when you got to a particular point in the game and you realised your position was lost and you cried very early. I used to play this multiplayer game called Vitez, Vampire the Eternal Struggle. And it was like a vampire card game. It was multiplayer and fun. And it used to always be at the big tournaments, used to always be like a bit of a reward / a razzing for the person who would who would bring the Cry of Doom first. And I think like it used to be like if the Cry of Doom happened within the first hour, it was a 2-hour game. You're kind of like, come on, man. It's like not even an hour yet. Just relax. There's still a lot of game to go. But slowly but surely over the years, it became sooner and sooner. And I think once we had somebody at a final make the Cry of Doom saying that their position was lost and there's no way they could win the game before they even sat down. They arranged the seating and they went, oh, that's it. Game is over. So I just love that idea.
I guess if you build a mythos about yourself, you're eventually going to become, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you make that Cry of Doom, eventually you're going to cry it before you've even got into the game.
Yeah, absolutely. So I attended a local tournament on the weekend. It was a lot of fun. It is in this meta that's fast becoming, I think for a while, when we got back from Worlds, post Worlds, you're thinking, all right, we got these new roles, but Children of the Emperor is going to come out, in December, so like it's pretty much a lame duck meta. Then we found out it was January, and now it's February, and so it's actually now, it's going to be like a 3.5 month meta, and it's probably one of the longest metas that we would have had in total for the card game. Like the one that we're playing at the moment in terms of the environment would probably be very close to, maybe there was that little gap in the elemental cycle between that and Disciples, but essentially it is the longest sort of time we've had to stabilize and play around with cards. So it was interesting to see what people were doing with this very known environment. And I'll tell you what, it was a pretty hard tournament. There was 6 players, but like 4 had a motos or something. And it ended up JK fellow roller ended up winning with a crab deck. I call it the no innovation crab. It's the just crab with the unicorn splash, the same deck that people have been playing with forever, except now it's got 3 fight-ons in it because they can play it. Turns out it's still super strong and probably stronger with those fight-ons in it. Yeah, that beat my dragon deck there. Can you see? What is your thoughts in terms of where Crab are at the moment, especially with Fate Worse Than Death disappearing from the meta? Do you think Crab have got what it takes to be a tier 1 for the next month or so?
Yeah, I think they're probably one of the best gatekeeper decks at the moment. Like, if you really want to test a new deck, it's probably good to see how the matchup goes versus that Crab Unicorn deck. I haven't played much of it, but it feels quite strong. I've been more messing around with the whole broker sack pack, no attachments deck, but it's definitely really, it has been really solid, and I think Fight On and Crisis Baker kind of have elevated that deck back to a very competitive level. And with Unicorn Rising, it's very good to have a Crab deck that can address their aggressiveness early on, as well as Lion.
Yeah, I definitely use Jay. Jay's an exceptionally strong player of the game, and he's been playing Crab for a long time. So I certainly use that deck playing against him as a bit of a litmus test to see, with whatever new wacky creation I've got, whether or not it's just total jank or I can actually have a chance of making it competitive. And usually the first 5 or 6 games I get beaten soundly, and then slowly but surely I try and I figure out whether the deck has any true potential. It's good to have that as well. Like, I think there's something to be thought about, which is in your local playgroup. A lot of local playgroups have that guy who's really, really hard to beat. That player who's just kind of your end boss, if you want. And they're actually really good to have in your group, even though you might not win many games against them. They're good because as you're coming up with new ideas, or as you're testing for a tournament that might be outside your local playgroup, if you're traveling cross town to a different city or wherever else for a Kote, having those gatekeeper people there, I think, is a fantastic resource. And so maybe don't take a different attitude when you're playing them. Just walk into it going, I'm here because I want to take on somebody who's good, so let's just see how we go.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that it's probably a great way to do testing. If you don't want to play entirely on Jigoku, you can kind of build that local community up, and I think, like, at least out in Ringwood at the moment, we're really trying to all improve and get better. And just like for other card games I play, I'm trying to make the Ringwood group, like, when the Ringwood group shows up for a event, we're going to all perform quite well because we've been testing and practicing together. Teams are kind of becoming a thing in card games. I don't know if L5R it's kind of permeated yet, but definitely for other card games I've been playing, the rise of teams have kind of shaken things up. Like, everyone will bring the same sort of deck and try and dominate the meta with something that they've been testing for. I'm not sure if L5R will go that way because of the clan prizes and loyalty, but it's nice to kind of have a growth together.
I think that, especially at least here in the early days of Melbourne, for the new game, we did have Gatekeeper Games, rest in peace, but that was a fantastic place to play, and there was a crew of us there. That's kind of was my before it stopped existing. That was my sort of local gaming store, and there was and Meg, who's Meglin is a very strong Scorpion player, also our fellow Scorpion player here in Melbourne, and we had JK as well. So there were a few sort of us locals around there that would go there a lot, and that we did have a bit of pride helping each other out to make sure that when we went to good games in the city, the big city store, that we could all perform well. So I think it's nice to hear that that's happening out in Ringwood, and I know there's a store out in I think Hoppers Crossing, I believe it's called. It's not necessarily very central, but they've got a crew, and I'm sure when that crew comes along for the tournaments there, Eli and his friends have been practicing hard, and they're gonna give us a good run for our money.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of exciting, so that's good.
Yeah, so I tell you, it was very interesting playing that local tournament there, realizing some things changed and some things don't. The things that don't change are Watch Command is still a very strong card, and it is really interesting to think about attachment control and how we're still in this odd spot. There's more attachment control coming in Children of the Empire, but I think we often we often talk about how the fact that other clans, like, there's only limited clans that have attachment control, and because the attachments are so strong that there's only a few viable splashes, and we have to be playing either Scorpion, or we have to be playing Dragon as our splash if we're not playing those clans themselves. There is something to be said for the strength of what a deck's trying to do, and can it do it by ignoring people's attachments. And I think that that's something up until now, it's been very, very hard to just flat out ignore attachments. If you're playing a Crane deck and somebody drops, a couple of Watch Commanders against you, it's very hard for you to win conflicts if they're in if you've got a Watch Commander in every conflict there, because you do like to spend a lot of event cards and vice versa in various other decks. But I think now with those new previews and those spoilers we'll talk about later on, we're starting to see a lot of passive actions, like actions printed on cards that are holdings, provinces, characters that are actually quite potent and do swing conflicts, so you have less reliance on your conflict hand. So I think that maybe the solution to attachments is not necessarily attachment hate, which is always going to be important, and it's great that there's more attachment hate coming. I'm not saying that we don't need it, we do, but I think some decks will be able to find ways of dealing with decks that run attachments that are powerful, like Watch Commander, without just dealing with them directly, dealing with them indirectly by letting the rest of your game plan just work. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure if you've tried much, but I've found quite a lot of success in decks where I don't run attachment control. I often don't run Mere Mystics, and if I don't splash Dragon or Scorpion, I very much have the philosophy of you just need to go for Void Rings and remove the characters that are running the attachments. So you often have to cop the effect maybe once or twice, but you just aim to Void Ring and just get them off the board as soon as possible. And I just find that seems to work a lot of the time. In Scorpion, though, I have been trying the Collector a lot more. And that has been
definitely different way of attaching.
Yeah, well, in Crab especially, like you do have Karada District, but if that doesn't show up, you definitely go for the philosophy of assassinating away of the crabbing and Void Ringing and just trying to clear their board of the characters that have the attachments. I'm not sure if that's changed, but that was always my philosophy on how to deal with it.
All right. Well, before we get into the spoilers, and we've also got a special deck that Glenn has prepared to talk about, I did want to just take a moment to cross over to the interview that we recorded previously with the Brisbane folks. So Brisbane is in Queensland, northeast of of Australia. For those that aren't from Australia here, it was a pretty good little chat that we had all things Brisbane, and they are quite a different sort of group to some of the groups that we have here locally, and they may be similar to our listeners' groups. They may be different, but it was good to kind of hear a bit of some stories around the legends of their play group, or their sort of extended series, like the Brisbane or Queensland scene, greater Queensland scene, and what they're planning to do in the future. So might just pause here, and we'll cross over to there, and we'll to the interview, and we'll be back in a second. G'day everybody. Thanks for that intro there, Ben. This is Ben again, aka Simkov, here with some friends from Brisbane. We have the Brisbane scene, which is a big part of Australian L5R and has been for many, many years. And we're lucky enough today to be joined by a few of the crew. Perhaps maybe starting from Adam, did you want to just introduce yourself and let us know, I guess, how you got into the game and what your favourite clan is? Just a little bit of a intro to your good selves.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ben. Yeah, I'm Adam, or some of you might know me as Daidedi Sune. I've been, funnily enough, a Crane player for about 20-something years. I got into the game right at the start, and due to, as we were discussing off mic, an incredible amount of money spent trying to get one character, I decided to get out of the game for about 2 years, and then a mate of mine, Marty, came back, got me back into it, and through both the roleplay and the card game, I just loved Crane, and so I've been in that for all this time.
It should be said that very recently you were the inaugural Crane Hatamoto for Australia.
Oh yeah, that was a fantastic little honour, and getting to meet you guys down there. That was I felt really well run Kote. So hats off to Wayne. Thanks for that.
Yeah, as always. All right, who's next?
I'll go. My name's Kyle. I am one of Brisbane's local Phoenix players. I got into the game basically hearing stories of old 5R, like the community interaction with the design, development, and the story of the game. The 10 million Koku, the Kotes, all those kind of stories really drew me into the game. At the time, I was playing Magic the Gathering. I think anyone who's ever bought their own product knows you cannot support more than one card game at any given time. So, it was when I'd taken a break from Magic, and one of the friends who kind of told me all these stories said they're starting a new game. I thought I'll get in on the ground floor, and I essentially chose Phoenix because they're a clan full of wizards, and what's not to love about that? Yeah.
I think we have the legendary Chris as well.
Yes, hello, thank you. So I am a Lion player of old. I got into the game in about Gold, but I didn't really start playing in like a friend of mine introduced me to the game. I was using his cards. It wasn't really until the Diamond era where I really got stuck in and really started spending too much money on it. I played it almost all the way through to the end of the CCG, and obviously when the LCG started, I was all on board with that. So, been a Lion player right from early days.
I think the Brisbane scenes, generally speaking, it's either been the biggest or second biggest. It's usually always been a big home for L5R. It's been known from its L5R players. My experience with Brisbane is I haven't played there much, but many years ago in the older game is I did fly up there for a Kote, and it was at a place called Ace Comics, I remember, and there was a pub across the road where we all had lunch. Does Ace Comics still exist? Is that still a place where people play, or where do people play these?
Yeah, certainly. Ace is actually where most of our leagues get played. There's some other great places that we play at where they run some tournaments, including the Magic Vault over north, and another one called just the Vault in the city. So shout out to them. They run some great tournaments. What about you guys?
Chuck, who more or less runs the Brisbane scene, I'd say more or less. I've not heard of anyone trying to challenge him for it. He's the guy that got me into it. I play wherever he tells me to play. So it's
Chuck. Is he the guy that used to be referred to as Slug, or is that somebody else?
No, that's someone else.
Okay, I do remember Slug from the old game. There's some names that I remember from the. Okay.
Yeah. So Chuck used to be called Chucky No Oni. He used to be
yes. Okay.
very big Shadowlands. The Spider Clan was his thing.
Yeah.
But he's just hurting us all with Dragon in the meantime while we wait for Spider to be released.
Yep. Dragon was his backup clan, and so he's gone back to that.
It's a baby. I hear a baby in the background there. This is
Sorry.
fantastic. I guess one of the things that's quite interesting about Brisbane, apart from the fact that it's very, very far northeast, I guess, is for those who don't live in Australia, that we actually have more international listeners than we do Australian listeners. So howdy to the Canadians and Latvians and Icelandians.
Oh, I'd definitely say hi to all those people.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So before we get into maybe a little bit about what makes Brisbane unique from an L5R perspective, so what is Brisbane or Queensland like? Why would people want to go there? And from a holiday destination point of view, what do you love about? Why do you live in Brisbane or Queensland in general? I don't know if you all live in Brisbane's the capital of Queensland.
Certainly. The weather.
Yeah, definitely.
Hands
the
down.
winter is amazing.
Tell us about the winter. What's amazing about the winter in Queensland?
It's not
because it gets down to the temperature that everybody loves.
Yeah. Standard living temperature is Brisbane winter.
Yeah, for those people in the UK, you might imagine it to be somewhere close to your summer.
It's
fantastic
beautiful
time of year.
Yeah, my experience there is I've been up to the Sunshine Coast, which is not that far north, but it's a fantastic place to visit. It seems to always either be sunny there, and when it rains, it doesn't seem to rain down. It seems to rain diagonally. It's viciously attacking me when it rains, and it's so heavy.
It's just like everything else in Australia.
the ground doesn't really like the water, and the feeling seems to be mutual.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a tropical paradise up there. I love it, and the Gold Coast is in Queensland. I don't know how often you guys get to the Gold Coast, which I know is a little bit touristy, but I've spent a lot of time up there at tech conferences and business conferences, and man, I love going up there. But do you guys spend much time in the Gold Coast?
Unfortunately, not for me.
It is one of those funny things, I think, for a lot of people in Brisbane, where we have so many beaches that we can use.
Yeah.
It's just another
Yeah,
one
well, like, I think
that
we're
happens to be filled with
equidistant from the
tourists.
Sunshine Coast and Gold Coast, and then when you can't be bothered driving, there's just South Bank, where there's a little fake beach they've got set up there because we're lazy like that.
That's a fake beach in the city.
Yeah.
I've been up there when I went up there last time. I'm like, hold on, aren't I actually in Brisbane, the city, and I'm sitting on a beach? What is going on here? It's amazing. I absolutely love Brisbane, and I come from Western Australia, so it's kind of it's. I always view Brisbane as like what I wish Perth was. It's pretty close to it, but it's just kind of a bit bigger and a bit sunnier.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So, that's what makes Queensland a fantastic place to live, and I highly recommend anybody here, if you're going on a holiday to Australia, whilst Melbourne is the greatest city in Australia, Queensland is a fantastic place to visit. It's got lots of places to go. So after you've been in Melbourne, definitely take a look at Brizzy. There's a couple of other unique things just about the way that you guys play up there as well. And I'm sure there's a lot of L5R dads out there. L5R tends to attract, at least in Australia, and certainly when I travelled across to go to Worlds, there was plenty of older folk there, not necessarily your 16, 17-year-olds, but in Brisbane you guys have a few fairly, some kids, right?
Yeah, we do. We've got Lachlan, who you would have met when we went down to Melbourne for the Cote. He's a 10-year-old prodigy.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you say kids, they are little vipers, and they will destroy you if you aren't careful.
Yep, it is amazing how quickly they picked up on all of the nuances of the game, and they can play very, very well.
I think when Lachlan came down to Cote in Melbourne, he was like 4-0, and he was like round 5 against me, and he gave me a run for my money, and I was pretty scared. I got pretty lucky. I think that if the card draw had been slightly different, I don't think I would have got there. He's 10 years old. He was playing a Lions switch deck, and he was piloting it like a pro.
Yeah. It's actually really funny. Wade, one of the boys, he's about the same age. He actually plays Lion as well. So it seems to be, I don't know, Lion seems just to be the thing for the younger folks.
Yes, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, you're young in mind as well, Chris, so that's fine.
So does it create? Is it a bit of a friendly atmosphere? Like, do the kids when the kids get involved there? Is it much of a big deal? Do they fit in pretty easy, or what's the general atmosphere there? Because compared to the ultra competitive environment we see some places are really casual. Like, is there many challenges in getting kids involved?
I think when they're not around, it's less competitive, more casual.
We're a lot more relaxed when the kids are there trying to dethrone us. We've got to kind of really concentrate, and
just the quality of how they all play quite well, and it's not a matter of the kids, you need to pull your punches. You need to be on your toes just in case they just suddenly destroy you. So yeah.
Yeah.
I do like the environment that we play in, though, where we, like in our leagues, we actually play pretty relaxed. Like sometimes you'll take an action, you'll be like, oh, and then your opponent will say, oh, do you want to take that back? And it's just it's nice, fun, friendly play. There is a bit of competitiveness to it. Don't get me wrong, because everyone likes to win, but it's not win at all costs. It's like, hey, we're here to be friends. We're here to have a social game. It's all about fun.
It's a lot of us also, people like to try out new decks. People are trying to either nail down the concepts they've got already. Like, in general, we're all really good about forgiving these all errors or tactical whoopsies, just so that we're all learning. Like, we're all learning these different interactions. We're all getting better at the game. And like, it's even if it's most competitive, that no one's there kind of bringing the mood down by.
There's no tanties, no tantrums.
No.
Actually, probably the thing that I think that's probably impressed me most has been, like there's a lot of the old L5R players came over and been playing the new one, obviously, and they've had a bit of a leg up in general, just having previously played an LCG, and a lot of the newer players who started, obviously started, a lot of them hadn't really played anything like that before, and all of them have been getting, strides and strides better, all the time, and it's been really great to watch.
Yep.
And part of that's what you're saying. If someone makes a mistake, you're going, yeah, well, okay, excellent. Obviously, that was not something that you would do if you were fully cognizant of what this would be doing. So yeah, don't do that. And
Yeah, that's really cool.
if we all try and make each other better players, then it's more enjoyable for everyone.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I love is our post game chats. So you'll finish the game up, and then it's not just right next opponent. It's, hey, if when I was doing this, I feel if you had have done action X, that would have really changed the game, and then that just gives them insight into it piling their deck a little bit better. I feel, and I think that's just good. If we can make the game better, then we'll all get better.
Yeah,
Well, you guys sound like a lot more fun to play with than the rollers, because we are hyper competitive and we like nothing more than rubbing salt into the wounds when minor mistakes are made.
Whatever helps you learn.
Yeah.
I was going to say they don't need to. There's no one who can rub more salt into my wounds than I can.
Absolutely. But so I mean, it sounds like a fantastic environment to play in, and that's great. And I think that's one of the great things about Legend of the Five Rings in general, because it does attract a wide group of people, but also sometimes potentially older folk than Magic, and so and other games. So it does mean that you tend to get a pretty welcoming crew. And wherever I've been in Australia, and across the world now, is I've definitely felt that L5R is one of the most welcoming, the most welcoming community as far as card games go. And everyone, wherever I went, and especially when I went up to Coday in Brisbane, it was like, maybe I've never met you before, but you're part of our sort of extended family, and it's very, very welcoming. And I recommend, if you're for whatever reason traveling through Brizzy, please contact these guys, and I'm sure there'll be a local game there. But it's not all. It sounds like though that it's not all just casual, quiet sort of games that we're all discussing. I have heard occasionally things get a little bit crazy down there, and there was some sort of crazy story you were going to tell me about some particular game that happened one day.
It's less a story about one game and a story about my entire career playing this game. I have the seemingly magical ability to call out the one possible thing that could ruin me, and it will appear. Like
it doesn't always have to be the one.
No, or in your case, it's a consecutive series of turns which ruin me.
Yes. I mean, he's the only person I think I ever have played and had multiple times, where it's like Lion Sprite Brawler turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. Oh, one's in my discard pile. Oh, turn 4, there's a Spirit Caller. That's great. Back to 3.
You need to pray you need to make some offerings to the RNG gods.
Oh, I have sacrificed so much to them, and they just shun me. Playing a game last night, there's always that chance you're walking into either a feast of famine, or it's going to be a flooded waste, or it's going to be XYZ province. I can literally, no matter what it is or who it is, I can call it on a random coin toss. I will call inevitably that horrifying inevitability.
Actually, that's true. Yeah, the game that we played against last night, or that I played against you last night, I just managed to honour my guest of honour, and it's like she gets okay stats, like a 2/5 when she's honoured. It was more so the first card that he ran into on his attack. He ran into my dojo.
Yep.
Magistration. And so I was like, cool, I'll defend. You can't take any actions. Cool. So I do some stuff and win. Then I straighten, and then come over, and and yeah, it was a little bit obscene. 2 rounds of the game, I had, I think, 5 conflicts where I had a guest of honor. So it was,
It hurts my soul, man.
conflicts.
It hurts
and
my
that,
soul.
yeah, and I can only thank Kyle's amazing skill at drawing out. It's like, oh, you attacked the perfect province to be able to do this.
Actually, yeah.
I make everyone's decks more consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, I loved the game after that where you're playing against one of the local unicorn players, and I think your first attack you managed to hit his restricted card, which he was just for jank's sake running Feast or Famine.
Why not?
so you
With
just,
with my Kaide
what
with
are you
2
doing?
fate on her. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Absolutely lovely.
He
Man,
thinks
this
he's going
game
to try
creates
and
a lot of
melt
fun
down some more
situations.
D20s.
Awesome. So do you know that is Brisbane or Queen the greater is it just concentrated in Brisbane, or are there some play groups in Rockhampton and other places?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I wanted to give a shout out to groups in Bundaberg, Harvey Bay.
Bundy.
So there's about 5 in Bundaberg. There's about 8 last I saw in Harvey Bay. I went up there for a tournament. It was amazing. And because Bundaberg and Harvey Bay are only an hour and a little bit away from each other, they often migrate to each other's tournaments. So that's really good and shows
great.
the spirit of the game. Yeah, and also up in Townsville, there's also a good tournament scene up there. And shout out to Graham Hay for smashing me in the last Discord league, knocked me out of the final. Thanks for that. No, but he was an amazing player, and
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
He's gone very, very far in the Discord league.
yeah. So that's as far as I'm aware. If any of you other guys know, we got about 25 to 30 players in Brisbane locally. I think there might be more, but they might be some more casual players. And
Also, I think sometimes players, because we've had a little bit of a break in product release, I think with the flurry of Children of the Emperor, then all these clan packs, I think when people's favourite clan gets a clan pack, that kind of might draw them back to the game for a little bit.
I did notice, yeah, a bunch of people. I think it was from the elemental cycle. Like there was definitely a lull in attendance, but that's natural when you've got the same meta for however many weeks or months or whatever. Anytime for any game there's a large release comes out, people go, oh yeah, what can we do now? What's now possible?
Yeah. I think especially with Children of the Emperor being so big, I think that's going to be a real game changer.
I don't even know if we've seen a lot of what the clans are going to be getting, but we haven't seen a lot of the generic cards, I think.
No, they get previewed next week.
I look forward to that.
That's going to be, I think, probably one of the I don't know, a good deal of the meta shift, perhaps.
Yeah, a lot of the
gets
times
released
there's
on
a strong neutral card can really change the game. I think Censure was something that made the Imperial Favor really, really interesting when that card came out. There is a lot of those cards which are kind of neutral cards because everybody can use them.
Well, that's the thing.
we haven't
What deck doesn't run Cloud the Mind or court games? Like
Yeah,
it's a rare deck indeed.
Yeah, and yeah, once you've got those HMT decks, but but once we get such a huge glut of potential, I think neutral cards, like a lot of those could really fundamentally change the sort of the raw core part of people's decks. You know, you got fans, you got katanas, you've got the aforementioned cards, and what comes out of this. And we don't know what those are yet, and everyone's been staring at all these maybe quite powerful personalities and cards coming out for specific clans, but we don't know how that's going to get changed by the rest of the pack.
Very true. So in the meantime, are there any big tournaments coming up either soon or in the near future in Brisbane or in Queensland that you want to plug? Is there any Elemental Championships planned that you're aware of?
Oh, I think we've put in for them. I don't think we've heard about them yet. What we have a tendency to do is a lot of the clan packs and releases like those are done as usually a weekend tournament, but a lot of the quarterly ones are we usually, instead of having a one weekend event, our local games night will run it for 4 weeks, and you only have to participate in so many games. So if you miss a week, it's not a big deal, and then it's based off top of clan and who the overall winners are of that. So it gives a bit more consistency and reason for people to show up.
Yeah, and that's run every Wednesday night at Ace. And we also have a tournament, Chuck alluded to. We've got a tournament coming up towards the end of February. So I think he might have some wind on an Elemental Championship, perhaps.
Well, when that Elemental Championship does get officially announced, I'll make sure we share it with the greater roller community, and hopefully, and I think like if there is an Elemental Championship, I think this year, because these clan packs and the game's kind of it's past its infancy and it's now becoming a fuller game. I think we might start to see some folk travel. I think the travel bug's there, and it's not that expensive, especially if you're living in Sydney or Canberra or Melbourne, to actually get up to Brizzy, and it sounds like pretty welcoming community up there. So pretty excited about. I'd like to travel there at least once this year. So looking forward to that.
And
really, thank you guys. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, and it also helps if you've got someone who can you can crash on their floor and shout out thanks Merlin.
Oh yes, big thank you to Merlin for that, and thanks Wayne for organising it again.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was for Kote last year. We all
Yep.
Yeah, and we're going to have in Melbourne some very large. We're going to have a large national event at some point in Melbourne this year, which we'll announce once we've got our collective shit organised. But yeah, and that, I mean, Merlin was fantastic. He always lays down the welcome mat for anybody who travels down here. So I'm sure that this year will be no different for people travelling. Just contact us and we'll help you out. So thank you so much for coming on. Before we let you go, is there anything that you wanted to plug? Any sort of last comments, final thoughts you have for our listeners?
For people who are just up and about Brisbane at any point, Wednesdays at Ace Comics Annerley. If nothing else, Chuck and I will always be there in the afternoon. So if you want to meet
new players as well, right? Like brand new people who are just thinking about trying the game.
Yeah, no, anyone. So if anyone wants to we're happy. Like anyone in Brisbane is going to be happy to teach you the game because if nothing else, it gets more people into it. But if you're other new players, existing players, if you just want to hang out, play a couple of games, there's always going to be someone at Ace Comics on Wednesdays, and we'd love to meet you.
Awesome.
Right. I think that's that you said it all. Yep. Well done.
Yeah.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming on, and I would love to have you back on at some point in the future. Maybe when there's a big Brisbane event, an Elemental Championship or whatever it happens to be, you can come back on and tell us all about it.
Sounds great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for having us.
Right. Yeah, thanks very much, Ben.
All right. Thanks for that. That was a great interview. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. And now let's maybe get into this new archetype that you've been talking about, Glenn. Do you want to tell us about this deck that you've been slowly iterating on and you think is now ready for the mainstream?
So there's two versions of it. The first one was inspired by a few of the Greek players running a mill deck out of Phoenix, New Box. And the philosophy there was that you used Oracle of Stones along with the Seppuku Truth Seekers, as well as 3 backhanded complements to try and mill the opponent out while finding your 3 backhandeds. And then when they get to 3 cards in the deck, you can backhanded them, even if they're on like say 8 honor, and get them the game loss. That seemed quite effective, though very prolonged, and often opponents could break before you manage to get all those pieces together, because keep in mind you are drawing them cards with your Oracle of Stones, and so it was very hard to decide when you use those cards. But that was quite a fun deck, and you could mill people out and they'd lose 5, and you'd win the game, and then against Scorpion they'd play Duty, and then you wouldn't win the game, and it would just feel really, really bad. But So then I moved on to the Scorpion version, which uses the Heartless Intimidator, a card that I felt like hadn't had the recognition it deserved. I'm not sure. What do you think about milling cards, Ben? Do you see the value in removing copies of cards from opponent's deck, or do you feel that it's essentially the same as if they didn't draw it? They just didn't see it for the game?
I think, if you're talking about, if there is any value in milling, I think the value in milling is more than just making them recycle their deck to lose 5 honor. I think a lot of the value there is you actually get to see what's in their discard pile, and by knowing what's in their discard pile, it actually gives you information, right? So you now know that
Yep.
there's a forged in the discard pile, so at most there is 2 forgeds in his hand. So I think the information, having that information is very, very strong. And I think now more and more, and there's so many card draw effects in the game, and people love to use their card draw effects. So people will find themselves very, very quickly getting close to the bottom of the deck. So if you have and I would almost recommend sometimes when people are playing these sort of mill decks, have you found any value when the games can go on for a little bit longer and people are actually drawing more of their deck, making your deck like 42, 43 cards, just having a few extra cards in there so you kind of win that, you make sure you win that race?
Yeah, so my deck's at 43 cards at the moment, just so I don't mill myself with the Oracle of Stones. But I think that, like to your point, the reason I was trying this mill archetype was that my theory was that most decks have 40 incredible cards that go into their discard pile. And so if you manage to hit some really good hits off, like, say, Charge, Forged Edict, Fate Worse Than Death, you kind of reduce the strength of their conflict hand, while not really forfeiting much of your own. The real strength of Heartless Intimidator, though, is if you get 2 or 3 of them down, and then you start milling 2 or 3 cards off the top of the deck. It can kind of really ramp out of control. I versed an opponent recently where I managed to trigger, I think it was 3 or 4 different honor effects over the turn. And so I milled 16 cards by the end of the turn because I had all 3 Heartless Intimidators out.
Wow.
And that's quite terrifying to lose 16 out of 40 of your cards just from a passive character effect. I just think that the cool thing is that you can synergize it with the Plagiarist. So I've been using the Illustrious Plagiarist to copy really good events and then continue the mill afterwards. There's just a lot of intricate synergies, and it does seem quite fun to play. It can be quite hard to pilot because you're often forfeiting a lot of good defensive plays by, like, playing 5 Fate for a Heartless Intimidator, for instance. But I try to shore it up with things like Display of Powers and Against the Waves, and I actually dropped Forged Edict to run a Fate Worse Than Death, and then run 3 Censures and a Yogo Kikue to make up for the cancels.
Crazy. Okay, is there anything? So we'll give you the deck list in the description here of the podcast. Have you tried running that deck against the Gauntlet style decks, like your Crabs and Dragons that are running rampant at the moment?
I versed Crane, Unicorn, Crab, and Dishonor Phoenix are my 4 decks so far that I've tested a few games against each. I have been too afraid to try Dragon. My theory would be that Dragon, it can be quite hard to win by the mill, but you can win by Dishonor because you are pressuring their hand to the extent that unless they find Mitsu to kind of recur their cards back into their deck, you're going to have a good time.
Yeah, and I guess if you get rid of a couple let goes and you've got Cloud the Mind, Mitsu might be, you can mitigate Mitsu sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, it's sort of a work in progress. I don't know if the 3 Censures over 3 Forged is correct, but I am running 3 Fawning Diplomat to try and Keepers to try and get the favor generally. Have you tried Scorpion with Keepers, by the way? It's very weird. It's very weird sort of experience
pre
to have Keepers and Scorp.
Or sorry, pre the restricted list change. I was definitely my strongest deck sort of post Worlds and pre-restricted list in that little tiny period there was a Keeper based Scorpion deck that was running Void Fist, 3 Hurricane, or single copy of Void Fist, 3 Hurricane Punches, and then some of the with the leftover influence I was using Ancient Masters, and I think there was 1 or 2 Tattooed Wanderers in there, and man, it was great. I tell you what, having those monks available and the keepers was absolutely fantastic. They did a lot of damage. It's different then because I started experimenting with crab a bit, or started trying to learn how to play them, because you do have to learn how to play them. Fate management is really difficult with that clan. Keepers in crab, I think, just feel super, super strong. Same with lion, because their box just really accentuates the potency of them, because they count as 2 force instead of 1 force. With Scorpion, they're more about having a body, so whether that means being able to start a conflict or it means being able to defend a conflict and not lose an honor, I found them fantastic. Still not quite, still figuring out how to use them now within Scorpion, and to be honest, I'm kind of waiting around for Children of the Emperor before I put too much thought into how Scorpion goes. So I'm kind of stuck a little bit on this environment, to be honest.
Maybe if you can run the seal of the Scorpion and then utilize some effects off their shinobi traits, might be good.
You're becoming the Sealamoto, Glenn. You're loving those.
No, I think there's 2 cards that trigger off shinobi, so you could try it. But
there's more than 2.
The keepers are interesting in Scorpion, more so than other clans. I just don't know how they fit, other than they give me glory for the favor.
Yeah, I don't know. Right, so there was some other pretty big stuff happening. The incredible amount of Elemental Championship events that are occurring they started rolling out last weekend. We had I think there were 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There were 7 events, of which 6 there were results reported for that I could find. What's really interesting, so these are essentially the first decent-sized events for this current meta, and the results are, I think, very, very heartening. There were 2 crane winners, a dragon, a phoenix, a crab, and a unicorn, so it was a really, really huge spread, and it's the first event of note that I'm aware of that Unicorn have won in the history of New 5R. That was, congratulations, Chris Hornsey. That was in the London Elemental Championship at Darksphere in London in the UK. I think they're in the European Union still. I'm not sure. Right, but anyway,
I think I would preface this by saying that these tournaments are quite prestigious. They're the equivalent of regionals for other FFG games, and so to win one with a significant player count at most of these tournaments is very great achievement, and so we should commend all of them. Chris it's not hard to go.
Chris won with a field of there was 30 people playing in that tournament.
Yeah,
and Darren Hazelden was there, who pretty much every tournament he goes to, he always does really, really well. And there's a few other names there. I'm not the UK expert, but there's quite a few other names there of people who, looking at their Lotus Pavilion records, seem to have done quite well elsewhere. And he defeated a Scorpion in the final. But he had to, if you look at, he kind of had to beat everybody. He beat a dragon, so beat a dragon in the semis. He had to beat a lion in the top 8 in the quarterfinals. So he kind of faced off with against a lot of different clans. So do you think it's positive that we're starting to see more clans dominate, or do you prefer environments where there's kind of like 2 or 3 major powers, or do you like a bit of variety?
No, I like the metas where you can have been testing something kind of not known in secret and bring it and kind of really show your hard work and have it pay off quite significantly. Through both calling the meta and playing, a really tight game. That Unicorn deck in particular, I really, really liked the way it was built. And I think Unicorn were in a place where if you have a really great pilot and you have a really solid deck, you have every chance as any other clan to get to that, in tournament winning level.
Yeah.
The diversity is great. I definitely, I feel like that's encouraging to the broader community that people can feel comfortable bringing any deck to a tournament and feel like they have a very fair chance of making it to the top.
I think
I'm not convinced there's 1 or 2 super strong decks. I feel like it's quite broader than that.
Yeah, I agree. I love to see, as the card pool is getting deeper, we are seeing a lot of variety in the decks that are having success. I think if we look across here, there was Tom Masonville. He won the North Olmsted, Ohio Elemental Championship with a Crane Splashing Scorpion, which is good to see. And so did Ronnie. Ronnie was up in Ontario in Toronto in Canada there, and he again he's a very strong player. He's beaten me many times in Global Discord League and definitely beat me at Worlds. And he's a great Crane player, so he recorded a win, which is no surprise. James Matthews won with Dragon Crab. That's the traditional Dragon Crab deck that was actually taken off Fro's video. That was up in Kansas, in Kansas, and I think he beat slash there may have been the concession Fro playing Unicorn. So Fro Top was playing Unicorn in the final, so that was a top 2 finish for Unicorn. So that's of the first 5 events, at least 2 of them had top 2. There's a win and a second place, so that was a big deal. And then we had Phoenix won. Matthew Grenier with the Phoenix Dragon combo. He had a win in Wisconsin, and then Max. So Max Williams. He's a guy. I played him up at Worlds. Actually, he's a well-known crab player, and he tends to boast a lot of good results. So I think it's absolutely no surprise that he managed to win as well. So it's quite a broad field, but we are seeing. What I like is we're seeing players that are known to be fairly strong, plus some new names up there. Winning these elemental events, they are being treated quite seriously, but there is a variety of clans taking them down. And hopefully, as we see all of the events going forward over the next few weeks, I know of at least 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 elemental championships happening this weekend, which is pretty exciting. And we've started seeing streaming. The Canadians streamed their event, and we did have some streaming out of I think maybe it was Dark Sphere. I'm not sure. There was one of the other tournaments did cast as well. So it's good to see some community getting involved, streaming these live streaming games. I find to be very, very exciting and a lot of fun to watch. So I spent a bit of time over the weekend having a beer, watching these games, being excited, writing down my notes. So I think it's a lot of fun, and we're starting to see the community build to a bit of a fever pitch. I think this tournament series has proven so far. It's only week 1, but already quite a success, don't you think?
Yeah, no, definitely. Like you're saying, if this meta has been one of the longest in the card game's life cycle so far, it's great that there is not really this giant gap of prestigious events, and that rather that there's this great circuit of elemental championships and kotais. Where people can kind of refine their decks before the meta shifts again with monthly products coming out.
2 major events as well this weekend. We've got WarpCon Kote, which is in Cork in Ireland, and then we've got the Phoenix Kote, obviously in Phoenix in Arizona in the United States of America. So there's a US and a Ireland Kote happening, and the Cork Kote from memory had Cork's held a lot of big events in old 5R as well. So I think it's going to be exciting to see. I think they'll get some good numbers there. I think they had, I can't remember how many they had last time, but that was the Kote where Matt Light playing Scorpion won last year. And there's an interview, I think if you look up that date, around about that time, there was an interview with him on Jade Throne, so if you want to hear it. And I think he was pretty sure he was on, I think he did a tour. In those days, if you won a Kote, you got kind of to wear the Tour de France sort of yellow jersey and do a bit of a media tour there. I think he was on Troll 5R and pretty much every other news outlet that would let him talk. So he's out there defending his title. See how that goes. But I'm really looking forward to seeing those Kotes and seeing what do you think's going to be up there? Do you think we're going to get a first Unicorn Kote win this weekend?
Certainly doable. I'd like Crab to take one for the team. I'm not really familiar with who is actually going to that event, but I'm sure that the usual Dragon, Scorpion will be there threatening. But I'd really like a push for Unicorn to make it to the top of the food chain.
I do hear that there potentially might be one or more of the Greek contingent making the Cork Kote, so I'm very excited to see how those Greeks do there if they do manage to make it.
That will be exciting if they go.
I love those guys. But I think it is an interesting point we're at, where I think that if we look back on past sort of past metas, past restricted environments, you could kind of put your money on it that, you know, it was either going to be Scorpion or Crane winning, and then eventually you got to the point where Dragon started winning Kotais. But like there was really only, you know, it was very rare that anybody won that wasn't Scorpion or Crab. So it's nice to see that shifted around. And whilst I am a diehard Scorpion player, and I would love to see Scorpion win every tournament, I know that that's not necessarily the healthiest thing for the game. I can barely admit it, but it is true. So I am very excited to hear what happens there. I think Unicorn, I'm going to call it, I think Unicorn are going to make the top 4, but I think they're going to get knocked out in the semis. And I just feel like we're going to see a very, very tough Crane v Crab slogfest in the final. That's my guess at Cork. I don't know about Phoenix. I don't know those guys, but I just feel like that's what's going to happen. I feel like we're going to see lots of Crane. I think we're going to see a lot of Crane and a lot of Crab do really, really well, and we'll see 1 or 2 Unicorns that have figured out the magic formula almost make it. That's my guess.
Yeah, it sounds like you're hedging your bets, but I think it'll be a great event. I don't know, man. Unicorn right now, I'm a bit worried as to the fact that they're getting so many quality cards in just the next 2 releases. They just, with the Fateless and Death going away, they seem very much on the cusp, if not at the top. Like, if they draw well, which, you know, every deck can do well if they draw well, but if they draw well, it's very hard to stop them. If they break 2 or 3 on turn 1, it's very hard to stop their momentum. But yeah, so that's exciting. It sounds like 2 competitive Kotais, a wide range of fields, and Simkov hedging his bets as usual on who will win.
I'm a big fan of L5R, and Legends of the Five Rings will be the winner at the end of the day. Right.
You're just spreading your clan loyalty just a bit too thin, mate.
Right. So just to close it out, there were a bunch of new previews dropped, and you can tune into your favourite podcast to hear detailed analysis. But if you're still listening to us, we'll talk about them too. Was there 1 or 2 cards that you thought were fantastic that you would want to talk about, Glenn?
Yeah, I think maybe I'd like to talk about 2 in particular. I think Illustrious Forge, the province, it's 4 strength, and it has the reaction after this province is revealed, search the top 5 cards of your conflict deck for an attachment and put it into play attached to a character you control, shuffle.
And it's fire, right? It's a fire province.
I think this deck, it's a fire province. I think this province seems very strong in certain decks that start running slightly stronger attachments. There's quite a large range of 2-cost attachments currently, and like if you want to get full value, you obviously want to go for those. You obviously do not want to put Pit Trap in your deck because you won't have a legal target for it here.
Wait, so PSA, Crab players need to consider taking out those Pit Traps, because I think it's a pretty standard 3x, right? Like it's a 3 times in most Crab decks, so they need to reconsider that card.
In my secret Kotai testing deck, it is a 3 of, but otherwise no. It's definitely not a staple in the Crab deck. But it's to a character you control, so you really want like Sashimono, Way of the Dragon, the 2-cost attachment from Phoenix that's champion only, that has yet to see play, but that's an option. There's there's a whole heap of great 2-cost attachments that will just get let go, but if you get to play them for free, I feel like that's a pretty good trade for a fire province in particular.
Do you worry that
I'm not sure the fire province?
Do you worry that because it's only on reveal, so it's not a repeat effect? Like, is it the sort of thing that maybe you put on your stronghold to kind of go for a bit of a prayer card, or can you see it in some decks where there might be potentially more aggressive if you use it to push edges? Like, where can you see applications for this card? Where will it work?
Maybe in Charge Dragon, because you can then charge over 3 turns and run attachments the Kitsuki Yuruma. So you could like charge him out, flip it back face down. It'll immediately, and then like the following turn, it can flip back up.
And so you can
just like talisman them into it again.
You can also go grab a reprieve, right?
Yeah.
God, I love that. I like that. So your rumor becomes
So
a
you
bit of
could
a powerhouse.
you could just, yeah, you could anything that has when revealed. I always think that maybe he's the one you want to put it in. I will say though that if you do run it in Dragon, you are giving up Restoration of Balance, and so maybe this is just my secret plan to nerf the Dragon decks.
Okay, couple of points.
But it's an interesting effect, and I really
Restoration of Balance seems good.
I think. Yeah, like I said, I think it's more that you get a free attachment and then they have to expend a very limited set of attachment removal to remove a very costly attachment that you paid no fate for. Like, I think it's quite good because like if you just whack a Sashimono off this onto someone, it kind of needs to be answered. Quite soon. A free Watch Commander. Free talisman. There's, it's. I feel like it's a good province. Even if it just happens once in a game, it can just help you get that edge in a conflict.
And was there another card you said you wanted to talk about?
The other card I was interested. Did you have any other thoughts on it or?
I guess.
No.
I guess.
Did you have it?
There was a card I wanted to talk about, the Kikita Dojo. I think that's a fantastic card. Well, I guess there's kind of the Kikita Dojo, and then there was the other holding that got revealed last time, which was the Kikita Dojo lets you bow people as a jewel. It's like a cool holding. So it's the dojo, which that trait is becoming more and more common. So I'm guessing we're going to see a neutral card that relies around the dojo trait. And this is action during a military conflict. During a conflict, so it can be any conflict. Initiate a military duel, resolve the duel. Until the end of the conflict, the duel's loser cannot trigger its abilities. If the duel's winner is a duelist, bow the duel's loser as well. So this card, to me, it's primarily a bow, because you're going to be running it out of a duelist deck, and sometimes it will turn off people's abilities. I think it can be played around quite well in terms of the sort of mini blanking effect, but I think it's very, very strong as a on-the-table bow, and it will make Crane provinces harder and harder to take. And I think that in Crane decks that are running more and more conflict characters, you can probably get to the point where you can just hold like 2 holdings statically in your province, and at the end of the turn, and not worry if you get a sort of quote unquote bad flip from your dynasty. Potentially, if the duelists are coming, you just kind of want to keep your duelists on the table, and I think this is the beginning of what will become that sort of very defensive style Crane that's so hard to penetrate. Because I think up to this point here, Crane have been played successfully when they're very, very aggressive, and this is kind of the opposite of that. I guess you could do it when you're attacking as well, right? It doesn't have to be in defense. So maybe it's just really good. It's
pretty good, man. Like you can use Doji Challenger, right? You can hook someone in and then do the duel.
Oh my God.
And then so like who cares if you win or lose? Like you don't.
This
like,
is a monster of a card.
You've already
right?
used your triggered ability. Also like Brash Samurai, honor him, put a seal on him, and then you just just go to town as like a 4v something, and just deny their triggered ability. It offers a more intricate game, I feel, and it also is, because it's a holding, Earth roll becomes slightly better because you can run Sabotage to kind of just turn all these sort of things off.
I feel like that card will see the light of play, like more than a one of now, and I feel like every time I see all of these new holdings roll out, I definitely think Peasant's Advice is going to pick up in popularity.
Yeah, and also I think that it also reveals why Rebuild is probably a suitable choice for the restricted list.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like I definitely want to be able to remove these holdings and not feel like they're just immediately going to come back on the board.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. All right. Well, thanks. I think that's enough previews for now. We've kind of reached our coming close to the end of the episode there. Before we wrap up, anything you wanted to plug? Any final comments there, Glenn?
No, just there is CanCon for Australia next weekend. Not this weekend, the weekend after.
Yeah.
And so while all these Kotais and elemental challenges are going on and championships, it's great that some of the Australian community will be getting together and trying to prove who is the best while at a board game convention. So that'll be exciting
Excellent.
to see what happens there.
All right, well, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll be back next week. Let us know. Please leave a review on iTunes. It helps people find. I'm not. There's no money in it for us. It's just if you leave a review for us, then it helps other people who are looking for Legends of the Five Rings podcasts to find us before they find, Jade Throne or Six Rings or Troll 5R or any of those other podcasts out there, because we want them to come to us. So do that. Thanks everybody, and until next week, keep on rolling.